There's a new dawn, and with it might come a new fight. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and in this video I will be looking at the weekend of August the 29th and 30th 2026. So that sounds a bit dramatic, a new dawn and a new fight, and particularly after a full moon. You don't normally associate full moon eclipses with new dawns. After all, we're right in the middle of a lunar cycle, but I do think there could be something of a new dawn. A lot has happened. We've realized a great deal. Remember, this full moon eclipse was square to Uranus, the planet of revolution and explosions, a very powerful energy. And this could maybe clear the air. We see the truth, we understand the situation, and that does represent a new dawn. And of course, over the weekend, the moon moves into Aries. So, that is a very positive influence. And so I will be talking about this in this video, why I think it might be a new dawn. And I'll also be talking about where the conflict might be coming from. I also want to consider the death of the Norwegian king, Harald V. He died very recently. He died on Friday. And again, this idea of a sort of a new dawn. Well, the king has died, but he gets replaced by someone else, and so that is something. That is someone we need to look at. But perhaps this Norwegian situation, of a king dying, at this time where I do think it is about a new dawn, something changing. Maybe it's just kind of symbolic of what the world is going through. And having looked at the horoscope of King Harald and his successor, Haakon VIII, I will go through the 12 signs, do my forecast for the weekend, and then I will finish with an I Ching reading. So let's start with the horoscope for the weekend. Here it is. So I have set this chart for midnight on Sunday, August the 30th. So, exactly sort of halfway through the weekend, midnight New York time. And by the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So as far as this chart is concerned, you can see that the moon is in Aries. The moon has just gone into Aries. So the moon goes into Aries on Sunday, London time, at 3:38 a.m. So in New York, the moon will go into Aries at 10:38 p.m. on Saturday, and even earlier if you're in California, and even earlier for Nat if you're in Hawaii or Alaska. So this does create a division, the weekend before the moon goes into Aries, while the moon was in Pisces, and the weekend after. So at the beginning of a weekend, when the moon is in Pisces, I think just for many of us, it's just going to be, just getting over the eclipse. I mean, I think that eclipse on Friday or perhaps late Thursday, was quite a big deal. And what made it a big deal was the role of Uranus, the fact that this eclipse happened, when it was square Uranus, and I talked about that in my video for Friday. I'm suggesting it was quite an explosive and, revolutionary event. Things really could happen, and certainly things were happening sort of around the time of this eclipse. We had this massive flood, landslide in Nepal just before the eclipse, and around the time of the eclipse, of course, we also had the death of the Norwegian king. And there were other things going on which sort of caught the world's attention. For example, the director of the CIA flying to Moscow, which a huge amount of speculation about that. I mean, massive. I mean, I know that happened before the eclipse, but that was certainly a big deal. It really caught everyone's attention. I mean, at least anyone who was interested in Ukraine and in Russian-American relations and in Iran. It could have been about anything. So we are living in an unstable world, and so on Saturday there is a lot of sort of perhaps reflection about that. But this full moon eclipse for us as ordinary individuals, it's about realization. It's about the truth of the matter, and Uranus can represent maybe a shocking realization. We just surprise ourselves. It's really like that, is it? We get this shock, and then we have to do something about it. Then we respond to it, and I think there's an opportunity here to respond in quite a constructive way. Now, on Saturday, there isn't a huge amount going on. The moon will go into Aries in the Americas, or most of the Americas, certainly the United States, on Saturday evening. And aside from that, there is a semi-square between the Sun and Venus on Saturday. So the Sun and Venus have been in semi-square aspect to each other for a long time. I mean, through August, on and off, they've had this semi-square. And what's going on is that Venus is starting to slow down. Venus is now moving, I think, 50 arc minutes a day. I mean, normally it moves over a degree a day. That's, over 60 arc minutes a day. But now it's down to 50. So this means that Venus is moving at a slower pace than the Sun. And so it is slowing down. It just keeps getting slower and slower and slower. On, I think, September the 10th, it moves into Scorpio. It gets that far, then it goes slower and slower through Scorpio, and then October the 3rd, it becomes a stationary retrograde. And right now, this weekend, the Sun and Venus are in exact semi-square to each other. So this exact semi-square, that could be about relationships. I mean, Venus being a planet of relationships, that might mean that there could be a degree of uneasiness when it comes to dealing with other people. The Sun in Virgo, semi-square Venus in Libra. There is Venus in Libra, trying to be pleasant and nice and Libran. And then the Sun in Virgo could just be, but you've got other things to consider. What about this? What about that? Overthinking the matter. Perhaps it's about relationships being overthought. Or it could be about just, a general lack of ease, and perhaps people being just too self-conscious in each other's presence. And so, it is an aspect that has been around for a long time. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but perhaps when it's exact, that Sun semi-square Venus could be, particularly problematic. And moving into Sunday, well, Mercury is making a biquintile to Pluto. Mercury is 144 degrees from Pluto. And this biquintile, I would have said, is completely constructive. It really is. I mean, Mercury Pluto, as a pair, are about deep thought. But also, there's a propaganda aspect to Mercury and Pluto. We want people to listen to us. We want to be taken seriously. We want people to agree with us. And the urgency, might be quite extreme with this biquintile. And then the question is, well, what do we do about it? Well, we have the idea, we have the will, we have the desire for people to agree with us. We have a desire to get our message across. And from that desire comes planning. I mean, a biquintile is not a spontaneous aspect, I don't think. It's about deliberately deciding to do something. So perhaps with Mercury biquintile Pluto, we can deliberately work out how best to get our message across. So crafting the right words, making sure we get our timing right. So if we want to tell someone something or send a message, timing is important. And I think that good planning, that could be essential. We do have another quintile over the weekend, and that is Chiron quintile Mars, or Mars quintile Chiron. So Mars and Chiron are going to be 72 degrees apart. In fact, you can see that. I mean, there's Chiron at 0 degrees Taurus, Mars at 12 degrees Cancer. So you can see 60 plus 12 is 72. With Mars quintile Chiron, some of us might just feel that we want to have an impact. We feel we should have an impact, that it might almost be morally necessary, particularly if something is being done wrong. If it's something we don't approve of, we might just feel that we have to make a show of it. And it's another situation, like with the Mercury biquintile Pluto, where planning, could be important. Now, at the end of the weekend, the Moon starts to make a conjunction to Saturn. In fact, it makes a square to Mars as well. And this Mars square Saturn is now very close. It's exact Monday or Tuesday, right after the weekend. It's exact. And Mars square Saturn. Yeah, Mars square Saturn. It is an important aspect, and it can be a very difficult aspect, and it can be an aspect that relates to a struggle or a conflict, and that's perhaps the reason why I've kind of described this weekend new dawn, new fight. And where is the fight? I mean, the fight perhaps is something about the immediate future. There is a struggle. Now, that struggle, could be with ourselves, that inner battle. It could be a battle with other people, and it's a battle that takes place on many levels. It's not just about winning and losing. It's about developing the right approach, asking yourself whether the battle is even necessary. But the moment we feel that something new has started, then we perhaps have to straight away think about how are we going to actually fight for it? How are we going to struggle for it? And this is kind of what happens when you start to talk about new things taking place at the time of a full moon eclipse, because normally you don't associate full moon eclipses with things that are new. But I think there is this idea that something new is happening because the moon is moving into Aries. It's the end of a month, and it just generally feels that a real change is happening. So that is the picture. If we set the chart for New York, if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, then at midnight on Sunday the 30th, the moon is at 23 degrees Pisces. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, then through Saturday, the moon is solidly in Pisces, and it won't be until the afternoon on Sunday that you will experience the moon moving into Aries. So aside from that, I mean, I don't think that there is a huge amount to report there. And then there is the heliocentric chart. So if we look at things from a perspective of the sun, we put the sun at the center of the solar system, where of course it should be. Then we see that Venus is quite close to a conjunction of Pluto. In fact, Venus, Pluto, Mars and Uranus are sort of forming a trine. So the Venus having made a trine to Uranus, it makes a conjunction to Pluto, and then it will move on and start to make a trine to Mars. And additionally, Venus will make an opposition to Jupiter. So there is definitely some action there from Venus, and I would have said Venus-Pluto conjunction in a general sense. People might be, very concerned about relationships. They also could be concerned about art, Venus being a representative of art or symbolic of art, and Venus can also be about money as well. So Venus and Pluto, over the course of a day, over the course of a weekend, there could be moments of obsession, whether it's about art, relationships, money, just something that people really want to hold on to. And so let's now look at the horoscope of the King of Norway. Well, the old King of Norway, King Harald V, who died on Friday. I think it's sort of 6:35 a.m. And the death of King Harald, I don't know anything about Norway really, but it kind of seems to be symbolic of some kind of change. We especially as we've just had the eclipse. So he did die, very very close to the eclipse. And if we look at the eclipse in general, on the full moon, here is a full moon eclipse set for Norway. So if we set the eclipse for Norway, 1218. So 1218. This is set for New York. So set for Norway, that would have been 6:18 a.m. I think the eclipse was, in fact, 7 minutes before the king died. So so that would make sense, isn't it? So this is set for New York. So that's 5:18. That's 5:18 a.m. London time, which is 6:18 a.m. Norwegian time, and you can see that it took place just after sunrise. So this eclipse, really did pick up on Norway. I mean, of course, the all the places where the sun and Mercury, where the sun was on the ascendant, it went through Europe. We can draw a line. So let's just do an astrocartography of that. So I did this yesterday, but just a reminder of this line. And I don't know to what extent this is going to have a huge impact on Norway. I mean, obviously the King of Norway doesn't have a huge amount of power, but here it is. Here is the line of all the places that Mercury was on the ascendant, all the places that the sun all the places where the sun was on the ascendant and the moon was on the descendant, and you can see that it goes straight through Norway. It also goes through East Germany. I mean, I discussed this yesterday. I think that this eclipse going through Germany probably has a lot to do with the elections in Saxony-Anhalt in a week's time, where many think that the AfD, this right-wing party that everyone in Germany seems to be so afraid of, could very well get a majority in the legislature for Saxony, not in Germany as a whole. So Norway was just one of the countries to be hit by this. I mean, it could have been, Czech Republic. It could have been, it could have been Austria. Vienna is around there. But as it so happened, Norway is a country that was so far has been most impacted by this eclipse. And then there is the king's chart. So the king's chart is where's it gone? I just had it. There it is. So I don't really want to say a great deal about his horoscope, because I'm thinking more about the event of his death, and he was born quite close to midday. So he was born at 12:45 p.m. on February the 21st, 1937. Just as the sun was moving into Pisces, so the sun was at 2 degrees Pisces, and the sun was pretty close to the midheaven. And you could say, well, if you've got the sun on the midheaven, that talks about someone who is in the public eye. It's not a bad place for the sun to be. And in fact, what strengthens the sun is the fact that it is in mutual reception to Venus. So the sun is in Pisces, which is the exaltation degree of the exaltation sign of Pisces. Venus is in Aries, the exaltation sign of the sun. So yeah, there is this sun-Venus mutual reception by exaltation. You can see that it is quite a northerly chart. One of the problems with the Placidus house system is that, as you go further north, it can start to break down. And, already we can see the impact of a northerly latitude, 59 degrees north. I mean, it's getting a bit north. The Arctic Circle is 66 degrees north, isn't it? Something like that. And so when you look at this really tiny first house, this first house is only 10 degrees wide. Nonetheless, he has, I would have said, the moon in the first house. I mean, technically in the 12th, and he's got a good moon. I mean, his moon is in Cancer, in its own sign. But what is really outstanding about the death of King Harald is that its predictability. Now, if I had been a Norwegian astrologer, I think I would have quite possibly predicted his death using very simple astrology, completely straightforward. This is not a difficult technique. But obviously, if I had been a Norwegian astrologer, and I would have been interested in Norwegian stuff, and I would have been interested in the horoscope of Norway's king, and I would have noticed the fact that he had his midheaven at 5 degrees 52 Pisces. So 5 degrees 52 Pisces. Well, what are you thinking? Well, we just had an eclipse, didn't we? So we just had this full moon eclipse with a moon at 4 degrees 54 Pisces. So this eclipse was right on King Harald's midheaven, and given the fact that he was sort of 89 years old, I think he was in poor health, and having this eclipse on his midheaven, and the fact that he has the sun on his midheaven as well, I would have said that that suggests a change. Now, you don't normally associate aspects of the midheaven in terms of death, not really. But in this case, an elderly king in poor health, eclipse on his midheaven. I mean, what are you most likely to predict? I think so. I think if one had been a Norwegian astrologer, I don't think one would have had to have been a particularly experienced astrologer. This is just easy astrology. You look at the eclipse, you see where it is. You look at the king's chart, you see his midheaven. pretty straightforward. You might also want to look at his solar return. Here is King Harald V's solar return for his birthday, his 89th birthday. And what's kind of interesting about this is he's got his ascendant is at 4 degrees 53 Sagittarius, and his descendant is at 4 degrees 53 Gemini. So if you link the solar return with the eclipse was at 4 degrees 54 Pisces. So the eclipse was within 1 arc minute of squaring his ascendant and his descendant, plus at the time of his solar return, Uranus was at 27 degrees Taurus. So Uranus moved into Gemini, and he died, fairly close to Uranus on a descendant. So I think that there was, a degree of predictability here. And you'll notice I'm just using a simple transit and a solar return. In this case, I think there was predictability. It's not always as easy to predict death, like this. And okay, there could have been other manifestations, but I do think that it was quite straightforward. Now, we do have a new king, and of course, the title of this video is, New Dawn, New Fight. Will the king have to fight? Maybe not immediately. So here is his successor, his son, King Haakon VIII. And the thing about King Haakon VIII is, he's got Venus on the midheaven. Venus widely conjunct Regulus. Probably with about 5 degrees, maybe more than 5 degrees. But Regulus is a powerful fixed star, and you could associate late Leo with kingship, even though Regulus has processed into Virgo. And so maybe that Venus on the midheaven is perhaps some sign of kingship. He also has Mars in Aries. That's quite a strong Mars in Aries. Mars is in the house of its joy, and so that's not bad. I don't know how people in Norway regard the new king. I assume that now he's king, he's going to get a sort of a blast of popularity. But that Mars in Aries, it might be in the 6th. It might be joying in the 6th, but it is opposition Uranus, and this opposition Uranus could be a problem. Maybe not immediately. And we also have to remember that Haakon VIII is now head of state. So even though the Norwegian monarch does not have a great deal of power, that doesn't mean to say that he is not symbolically important as head of state. And so you could say that what happens to the king happens to the country. And having Mars opposition Uranus certainly has the potential for being accident prone, for getting involved in things that really may be quite difficult to get out of. You might think about it in terms of war, just accidents in general, doing things which might undermine his popularity. And we know that Saturn has gone into Aries. So we know then that next year Saturn is conjunct his Mars. Saturn will also be conjunct will also be opposition his Uranus, and he's got a pretty close Sun-Mercury conjunction there, and that could be problematic as well. So this Sun-Mercury conjunction is not quite cazimi. I know that he's an intelligent, well-educated person, but his Mercury conjunct the Sun does indicate that Haakon VIII potentially doesn't always have good judgment. Something might be sort of blinding him, and it's Sun and Mercury in Cancer. Maybe there's a certain excess of emotion, just getting emotionally involved in something, and just getting wrapped up in it, and then after that he just can't help himself. He just drifts along, and the fact that he's got Moon in Pisces, Moon in Pisces, he really is a water person, having the Moon, Sun, Mercury in water signs. So that that does kind of stand out. So I think when Saturn does go conjunct his Mars, which is going to be sometime next year, it will be. Let me just have a look. So his Mars is at 1818. So that's the first passing is in April of 2027. I mean, Saturn doesn't. It does go retrograde, but I think that's it. So there's a single passing of his Mars and his Uranus in April of next year, and it might just be quick. And it might be something very simple. He has an accident. Maybe he has a minor accident. And that's it. But it could be more substantial, and it could say something about his country, because he is the head of state, and very quickly he is married. He is married to a woman called Meta Marit. Now there is a time of birth for her, but it's given a C rating using Rodden. So I have decided not to set this up with an exact time. And I've just gone for a noon chart. And so she has Saturn conjunct the South Node. If I understand it rightly, she's not always very popular in Norway, and she's been involved with certain things which have made people doubt her character, and so forth. So we know it is a bit of potentially a bit of a problem. Now, she, like her husband, because she and her husband were born very close to one another. She was born in August of 1973. He was born in July of 1973. She has got her Neptune at 4 degrees 40 Sagittarius. He has got his Neptune at 4 degrees 51 Sagittarius. We have just had an eclipse at 4 degrees 54 Pisces. So the eclipse has hit both of their Neptunes. And one wonders how actually are they responding to the situation. I mean, Neptune, you think of the collective, you think of in both cases, a certain amount of confusion. In fact, he has got a wide Uranus-Neptune semi-square, which is not necessarily an easy aspect, but there's something kind of quite unconscious about it, and one wonders if they're fully prepared. And then there's a question of what chart do you look at for when Haakon becomes king? I mean, you could say it's a chart for when his father dies, but I think probably we should look at the symbolic event, which is the coronation, and of course we don't know when the coronation is yet. So that's something that perhaps we need to think about. So anyway, those are a few thoughts about the death of Harald V and the accession of his son, and I think it's quite dramatic how the eclipse was involved, in particular the fact that the eclipse was right on Harald's midheaven. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of August the 29th and 30th, 2026. Aries, this weekend is taking place, very much in the shadow of the eclipse. So, on Friday, or perhaps even late on Thursday, we had the partial eclipse of the moon, and it was a big event, and it may take us time to recover from it. We have the moon in Pisces making an opposition to the sun in Virgo, and so from your perspective, Aries, it might just have felt that a lot was going on, a lot was building up, but you weren't entirely able to make sense of it. I mean, you were trying your hardest to create order and to create a sense that you knew where you were going, but it wasn't always easy. And at the beginning of a weekend, there just might be this feeling that, yeah, you are recovering from something, and that you're not quite ready to take the initiative. You're not quite ready to be a typical Aries, and that's fine. The full moon eclipse, it's it was a big event. I mean, it is a big event, and for many of us, regardless of our sign, it could be quite exhausting. There was a lot of pressure, and the sun, don't forget, is in Virgo, and so while the sun is in Virgo, if you're an Aries, you might be thinking about your health and your well-being, and whether you've got what it takes to move forward with your various plans, but the full moon did reveal quite a lot. Perhaps it revealed quite a lot about yourself. So there's a lot to get over. And this full moon might have also said something about relationships. And on Saturday we've got we've got a semi-square aspect between the Sun and Venus. This Sun-Venus semi-square has been around sort of the whole of August, but the reason it was around so long is because the Sun and Venus are kind of moving at sort of roughly the same speed. But Venus is slowing down, and it might be that with this Sun semi-square Venus that certain people are just a bit annoying, and they can't be ignored, but they could be exhausting, and this kind of adds to the pressure of this eclipse. But then the moon changes sign. The moon moves out of Pisces and into Aries. So this sign change takes place on Saturday evening if you're in the Americas, or at least most of the Americas, or in Europe or Africa. That would be very early on Sunday morning, certainly later on Sunday, perhaps Sunday afternoon if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But when this sign change happens, I think it is a bit of a relief. You finally feel that things have changed. You've got over the eclipse. Okay, you haven't got over the eclipse entirely. Eclipses can last for quite a long time. Certainly 2 weeks, maybe even a whole month. But at least the sort of immediate phase of this eclipse will be over when the moon moves into Aquarius, because that means that the moon is no longer in... did I say Aquarius? No, I meant Aries. It means that the moon is no longer in the opposite sign of the sun. And so, with the moon in Aries in your sign, that is very dynamic. The first major aspect the moon makes when it moves into Aries is a sextile to Pluto, and with that sextile to Pluto, it might feel that you're getting your power back, and that it is certainly a new beginning. And if you think there's a new beginning, and I think you will think there's a new beginning, that also means that you're going to become increasingly optimistic. You're starting to think about new possibilities. Now, this might kind of sound a bit strange because you don't normally associate full moons with new beginnings. You kind of associate full moons with something coming to a crisis. You understand something for what it is, and the moon is now waning. And so, when the moon is waning, you really should not be starting anything, but you still feel, Aries, that something has changed, that something has changed for the better. And yeah, you are going to be, I think, quite optimistic. You're going to have thoughts about, how things could be, and what you are going to do in order to be happy, to be constructive, proceed with your plans, and so forth. However, I did call this video "New Dawn, New Fight," or even "New Fights." So that kind of sounds a little bit disturbing. You've started something new, but that does mean that there are conflicts in the offing. And there are reasons why I said that. I mean, firstly, the moon in Aries, can be quite combative. Also, through Sunday, the moon is actually starting to move towards a square of Mars, and it's moving towards a conjunction of Saturn. And so what's happening is that there is a square between Mars and Saturn getting really close. It's just 1 or 2 degrees, and this Mars-Saturn square is a big deal, and I think that it does suggest a conflict. Now, I don't know where that conflict is exactly going to be. I mean, it might be an inner conflict, but we just have to keep battling. There are things we have to confront within ourselves, and that is the way forward. And this is perhaps telling us that it might be a new beginning, but there are still things from the past that we might have to confront. And just because we are sort of optimistic about the future, it doesn't mean to say that things that happened not so long ago can't have an impact. But that optimism, does matter. So whatever we're involved in, even if it does seem to be very difficult, we really have got what it takes to be able to make the most of it. And this Mars-Saturn square, this Mars-Saturn square, it is serious. Mars, your ruler, is square Saturn in Aries. Mars in Cancer, square Saturn in Aries, and it might be felt on a purely psychological level. You might feel that there is just something frustrating you, maybe in terms of your own psychology. But I don't think that any frustrations you feel are going to really be totally devastating, because in the end, I think that you're going to be able to see round them. You're going to be able to see other possibilities, and you don't have to just take one path. There are probably a dozen paths to the same objective, and if you can maintain that positivity, which I really am pretty sure you can, then I think you can do well, and you would not be given a fight if you didn't have the capacity to win through. So Aries, I know that it does sound difficult with this Mars square Saturn, but I think you definitely have got what it takes to actually deal with it in a constructive way. And additionally, with Moon in Aries, as I said, it is a new dawn. It is a new beginning, and I think you're going to be able to sort of look back at the eclipse and think about the kind of realizations you were having, and then be able to put them into practice. So, for example, you might have had insights about your health and your well-being, and they might have been, to begin with, theoretical insights. But as the moon moves into Aries, you're thinking, well, actually, what are you going to do? What are you going to initiate? Perhaps there are things you can get rid of, things that aren't doing you any good, that you can now distance yourself from. So I think overall this weekend can end up being quite positive, and whatever is in front of you, I'm pretty confident that you can deal with it. Taurus. Venus is your ruling planet, and it is slowing down. So Venus is currently moving around 50 arc minutes per day, and normally it moves at around over a degree per day. In fact, it normally moves faster than the sun, but it is slowing down, and this is a reminder, Taurus, that quite soon Venus is going to go retrograde. And it might not feel like it. Now, Venus is in Libra. It's in its own sign. It's definitely moving forward. But soon enough, it will happen. And, when Venus moves retrograde, you will perhaps, have to, go back over sort of old territory. Perhaps, there are things that you think are done and dusted, but, maybe that's not the case. And because the sun and the moon, because the sun and sun and Venus have been, approximately moving at the same speed, we've had an aspect between the two of, we've had this 45-degree aspect. It hasn't been exact always, but they have had this particular relationship that has been going on for some time. And that aspect is 45 degrees. It's a semi-square. And today, the Sun and Venus are exactly semi-square. And this is something perhaps you need to think about, because a semi-square can be a stressful aspect. I mean, you are trying to get yourself together. You're trying to prepare for things. I mean, maybe you have kind of some awareness of what Venus is going to do. The fact that Venus quite soon is going to go into Scorpio, and then it goes into Scorpio, makes some progress in Scorpio, before it goes retrograde. And when Venus in Scorpio, that is not the greatest place for Venus to be in. Venus is in its detriment in Scorpio, and it's then going to turn retrograde in Scorpio. And so it might just feel that you are in preparation, maybe almost like, some squirrel collecting nuts and stuff for the winter. And, it could be an early winter in the Northern Hemisphere, and quite sudden. And I'm not forecasting, doom and gloom or anything like that. I just think, Taurus, that you need to be realistic, and just because you think that something is done doesn't mean to say that it really is done. And it may be that sooner or later you're going to have to go back and have another look at it. And as far as this Sun Venus the Sun Venus semi-square is concerned, it just might feel like some kind of aggravation. There's you, trying to get things together, trying to manage things as best you can, but something or someone is distracting you, annoying you. It may be that they're being irresponsible. It may be we're dealing with perhaps a member of your family, someone sort of close to you, the kind of person you meet over the weekend. I mean, over the weekend you meet perhaps a different group of people than you meet over the week on a weekday. So there is certainly a negative side to this Sun semi-square Venus. I mean, there is a positive side. You could argue that, a semi-square, it's a dynamic aspect. And with this semi-square between the Sun and Venus, if you make a special effort to get on with people, you may not feel like getting on with people, but if you do make that effort, then I think that you will be rewarded, because I think that fundamentally at the moment, Taurus, you're quite conscientious. You kind of know how to behave. You know what needs to be done, and so it needn't be so bad. But I'm just telling you that things are not entirely easy at the moment. And when the moon moves into Aries, at some stage over the weekend. It will be on Saturday evening if you're in the Americas, and early on Sunday morning if you're in Europe. This afternoon, on Sunday afternoon, if you're in Australasia. When the moon does move into Aries, that might be a time when you perhaps need to reflect, and you don't have to be directly involved in things. Perhaps when you had the eclipse, this full moon eclipse, that might have said something about maybe other people, how other people responded to you, your place in society. Perhaps you had some insights into your friends and so forth, and perhaps you recognise that certain people maybe weren't particularly good for you, and with the moon in Aries, you may actually quite enjoy your own company, and you can think things through in your own way, and you can be also quite careful about it. I think that you have an idea about the way things should be developed, and if you're allowed to just run through with it, without being disturbed, that I think would be great. I mean, that is the right attitude. So do perhaps accept that it may not be a completely relaxing weekend, but if on Sunday you can create some distance between yourself and people who have a track record of being annoying, then I think that you would be making things a lot easier for yourself. I mean, I would, I'd love to be more positive, but we have to look at what is going on, and additionally, we do have a build-up to a square between Mars and Saturn, and this Mars square Saturn, that might say something about certain other people. This Mars Saturn square is it's pretty much exact at the end. Well, it's exact at the end of a month, and it is the end of a month. And the Mars square Saturn could be about just someone being annoying. It could be someone, could be a neighbor, for example, someone who you normally don't have any problems with, but their behavior, their attitude, could be irritating. It might not be a neighbor, it might be just other people in general, and you can perhaps see their frustrations, and perhaps they're trying to dump their frustrations onto you. So that might be another good reason, Taurus, why you need to keep your distance. Gemini. There is not a huge amount happening over the weekend. I mean, in terms of exact aspects, but we cannot deny the fact that we have just had a full moon eclipse in Pisces, and this full moon eclipse, as I described in my Friday horoscopes, I really do think that it has or will have an impact on you, and I think it's going to be quite a constructive impact. With the moon in Pisces, okay, it might be square Uranus, but you're thinking about yourself and perhaps some of your ambitions, and maybe there are things that you want to break free from. You can start to see real possibilities, and it's a time when you feel under pressure, but at the same time you feel that actually things could work. You almost have a faith in the cosmic process, that somehow the cosmic process is going to look after you, and maybe the eclipse has given you insights into how that might be. If you could break free from certain situations which may have been a little bit difficult, they were sort of trying to drag you in, but if you can just break free from that, then you might take the view that the sky's the limit. And I think Gemini at the moment, you do have faith. And Geminis sometimes have difficulty with faith, because Gemini, you can think too much. But actually, there is a place for faith if it's based on some kind of reason. But you can certainly see that, you can certainly see see the possibility. But what you have to do is you have to really be ready to make an impact. Remember this full moon eclipse was square Uranus, and Uranus, is in your sign, and so that is about you standing out, perhaps being ready to make a fuss. If you're not happy about something, things aren't going fast enough. Maybe you have to make a noise. It might not be appreciated, but you will be making an impact, and this may be a time when you start to see, you really see, what is possible. And although this eclipse, is a big deal, including over the weekend, there is another aspect to consider, and that is a biquintile between Mercury and Pluto. So Mercury is, of course, your ruler. It's making an 135 degree aspect to Pluto. Is it 100? No, sorry, 144 degree aspect to Pluto, because it's a biquintile. And so 144, that is 2/5 of the circle. And so this Mercury biquintile Pluto, it kind of comes in the wake of the eclipse. So, the eclipse was introducing you to a set of possibilities. Maybe it was just a single possibility. You perhaps started to think about what you could achieve, if you were just given the opportunity. You can still see the problems. You can still see why you might not be able to get your way. But the Mercury biquintile Pluto is kind of telling you that actually, Gemini, you can make things happen. You can have an impact, but not through doing anything, crazy and spontaneous. That's not what it's about. Biquintiles are not spontaneous aspects, in my opinion. Mercury biquintile Pluto is about you having the will to succeed. Yeah, and it is the will to succeed, and it starts as an inner process. You are thinking. Oh, well, Gemini, you're always thinking. You're thinking and you're imagining about how you'd like to lead your life, what possibilities you want to actually realize in your life, and then you have to come up with a plan of action. So that's how it works. Willpower leads to plans. So you have a plan, and you stick to that plan, and you're quite rigid about it, and you just see it through to the very end. And so I do actually think that this biquintile between Mercury and Pluto can actually be really empowering. It can really encourage you to force your will onto the external world, not in a way that is violent or is unpleasant. It can just be this gentle application of your will. You keep coming back to what you want, what you would like to happen. And if you just keep going, then thoughts which to begin with sound almost fantastical, maybe based on something very fragile like faith. Faith can be fragile, but it is a time of faith. And so, Gemini, if you believe in yourself and you just have a plan, then I think that you're going to be able to execute that plan. And, as you move into next week, I think that you will have realized or be able to realize some of your short-term ambitions. Cancer. The eclipse has happened, and you're possibly trying to work it out, and there's no pressure. I don't think there is any pressure, because on Saturday, the moon is continues moving through Pisces. It's not really doing very much in Pisces. It's like the thing has happened, and you've had some insights. I think you might have had some quite powerful insights, and those insights are certainly worth thinking about and worth developing. And the eclipse might have had quite a spiritual impact. You perhaps have a chance now to see your place in the world, and what you're here for, and so you can become sort of part of some sort of wider system, but at the same time you can maintain your identity. And there's no need to really do very much, and it just might be a time to reflect and realize that you can see things just in a new way, and this can really be be very constructive. But at a certain stage, the moon changes sign. The moon moves out of Pisces and into Aries. And so, while the moon is in Pisces, you could argue that the eclipse is still operational. That's because, the sun is in Virgo, and the opposite sign to Virgo is Pisces. So while the moon is in Pisces, you're still grappling with some of the issues of the eclipse, and that might require a lot of thinking, and you perhaps deep down wondering, whether you've got it right. Some of your ideas, your broader opinions, might be challenged, and I think that would be a good thing. And then the moon moves into Aries. Saturday evening, if you're in the Americas, early on Sunday in Europe, Sunday afternoon in Australia or New Zealand. And when the moon moves into Aries, that does represent a change. And when I was sort of looking at what was going on over the weekend, and thinking about what are the main themes of the weekend, one aspect of the weekend was about some kind of new beginning, even though it's a full moon eclipse. You associate full moons with something reaching a peak, not with a new beginning. But I think that this full moon, maybe because it's at the end of September, and we know that things are changing. Also this full moon is it's just before the moon goes into Aries, and so the moon in Aries, even though the moon is waning, there is a sense of a new beginning. And so when the moon does go into Aries, it just feels like a fresh start. And because the moon is in a cardinal sign, and you are a cardinal sign, and so when the moon moves into Aries, it makes a number of aspects. It makes a sextile to Pluto. So moon sextile Pluto means that you can contemplate change, and in your own quiet way, you're able to be sort of quite transformative. But the transformation happens with you first. That's what changes first. You start to think about how your attitude is changing, and you may want to keep things relatively secret. I don't think you're going to be especially open just after the eclipse. I mean, being a Cancerian, you are sensitive to the lunar cycle, and so having just had quite a serious eclipse. I mean, we all had quite a serious eclipse, but I think Cancer, you might have particularly felt it. And so, is there anything that really needs to be talked about? It might instead be a time for thinking and planning and so forth. But new dawn. What about the new fight? New fights. It might be a single fight. It might be fights in the plural. And what we're talking about here is a square between Mars and Saturn, because this square between Mars and Saturn is now getting pretty close. And Mars is in your sign. It's 12 degrees 14 Cancer at the middle of a weekend, and Saturn is at 13 degrees 47. So Mars and Saturn is just a degree or two away, and Saturn is in Aries. It's in a part of your chart that is really very important. And so with Mars square Saturn, you're starting to be aware of some kind of struggle, something that you have to really fight for. And you can't, I don't think, ignore this Mars square Saturn. I mean, you could perhaps pretend that it doesn't exist and just attempt to have an easygoing life, no challenges. Let's not argue. Let's not struggle. But the thing is, with Mars square Saturn, if you take that attitude, it's not going to like it. And you might find that Mars square Saturn works in maybe undesirable ways. You suddenly hit a brick wall. Things suddenly don't move. You're kind of perplexed by other people's negative reaction to you. On the other hand, if you just tell yourself, there's a Mars square Saturn coming up. This Mars square Saturn is in important angles of your chart, and it needs to be taken seriously, and you will take it seriously. Then I think that this Mars square Saturn can actually be a major plus in your life. And then, with the moon moving through Aries, the moon right at the end of a weekend, it makes a square to Mars, and then into the beginning of next week, it makes a conjunction to Saturn. So the moon really triggers the Mars square Saturn at the end of a weekend, and as you move into Monday, and you could experience this in a negative way. If you want a quiet life. On the other hand, Cancer, if you want to be tough, if you really want to move forward with things in quite a gritty, no nonsense kind of way, then I think you can, and you can probably achieve quite a lot. And it might feel that every achievement is a battle, everything has to be struggled. That might be your subjective impression, but the point is you are definitely going to be making progress as you move into the new week, and you should not be afraid of being in control, being the one who makes the decisions. And if something isn't right, Cancer, with this Mars square Saturn, I think you can tell people. You don't have to be polite. You don't have to be rude just for the sake of it. But if something needs to be done, if you want something, if you can see that something hasn't been done right, then I think people have to know about it. So Cancer, after this full moon eclipse, you might feel a bit vulnerable. But, I don't think you are vulnerable. And I think that by the end of a week, by the end of a weekend, you can really start tuning into your fundamental strengths. Leo, the weekend perhaps has two parts. the beginning of a weekend, the moon is moving through Pisces. By the end of a weekend, the moon is in Aries, and the Pisces part of a weekend may not be great. I mean, you've just had the eclipse, and there are still things to work through. This full moon eclipse, as I said, on Friday, it does hit the financial axis of your chart. So at the beginning of a weekend, you may just be dealing with things, perhaps relating to money, perhaps which are rather complicated, but perhaps they're unavoidable as well. Though, on the plus side, we are talking about the truth. If you are looking for the truth, if you want to have a good understanding of other people's attitude to money and what they're doing with their money, then now might be your chance. You keep your eyes open, you look at every detail, and you'll start to realize what actually is going on, and do give people an opportunity to speak, because you listen to them and you can start to understand the truth. I mean, if you want to understand the truth, you've got to listen. And it might have been a bit difficult to listen because recently, the Sun was making a conjunction to Mercury. Of course, the Sun is your ruler, so you might say that the Sun was blotting Mercury out. Mercury couldn't express itself. Mercury was perhaps trying to tell you stuff. You weren't really listening. But now I think you increasingly are able to listen, as Mercury pulls away from the Sun. And so you might get some valuable insights at the beginning of a weekend, of a financial nature. And then the moon changes sign, moves into Aries. So, when the moon moves into Aries, that means that the eclipse isn't so much of a problem. There are things that aren't weighing in on you so much. Maybe you can be, more relaxed. And, the moon, when it moves into Aries, it moves into sort of quite an expansive part of your chart. So trying to think things through, perhaps had some quite powerful feelings, and you kind of realize that things were complicated and it might all have seemed a little bit difficult. And then the moon moves into Aries, and suddenly things just feel better. There's more going on. The moon is in a positive sign. The moon is in a fire sign, and in fact, the moon is moving towards a trine of Jupiter. Okay, it's also moving towards a conjunction of Saturn. But I mean, I think that the conjunction of Saturn to Saturn, can be managed, and it's also making a square to Mars, and perhaps with that moon square Mars, which the moon square Mars actually takes place right at the end of a weekend, perhaps into Monday, and so with the moon square Mars and conjunct Saturn, there may be things that you are confronted by, but the question is, what is being confronted? How are you being confronted? I think some of your ideas are being confronted. You might think that you've just got it all sorted out, and by the end of a weekend you realize that maybe that's not necessarily the case. Maybe there are things that do require some more thought. And that could be annoying, but at the same time, Leo, I think that you do actually have a fundamental belief in yourself. Even if there are frustrations, even if there are annoyances, I think that you believe that in the end things are going to work out, and that you just have to keep doing what you do best, and everything else should come together. Virgo. On Saturday, the moon is still moving through Pisces, and so it's still in the sign opposition opposition Virgo. So Saturday still has a real full moon feel to it. Remembering on Friday or perhaps late on Thursday we did have this full moon eclipse, but this full moon eclipse was at 4 degrees? What was it? 4 degrees 54 Pisces, and so it happened in early Pisces. So this whole time while the moon is moving through Pisces, you can feel that eclipse. And that may say something about Saturday. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot to reflect on. And in terms of relationships, there may be a feeling of growing awareness. You can maybe see people for what they are really like. And even, if you've been in a relationship for a prolonged period of time, there are always new things to learn about another person's responses, their personality, their motivation, and so on. And it can be quite a difficult thing, learning something new, having revelations about another person, but it can't be helped. And these things do happen. Even if you've been in a relationship with someone for decades, for example, these kind of things happen. They do happen fairly regularly. There's always a full moon in Pisces, every year this time of year, and so you've survived these eclipses, many times before. So we don't want to exaggerate. But this eclipse is special because of its proximity to Uranus, the fact that Uranus is square this eclipse, and I think that on Saturday you can still feel the power of Uranus and the fact that you're being prompted to do things differently. And it's not easy, but you kind of know it has to be done. And you think about the future, and that if you were given a break, if you were given a chance, if you allowed yourself to do things differently, and to make a break from the past, you really could achieve something that it could be really amazing, and that marks you out as a real individual. So hopefully the full moon eclipse has given you the insights you need in order to create the foundations for actually quite an exciting future. But then the moon does move into Aries, and so when the moon moves into Aries, which would be late on Saturday if you're in the Americas, on Sunday if you're not, the immediate phase of the eclipse is over, and with the moon in Aries, you become more serious. I think that you realize that there are things you still need to work out, but I think at the same time you have more freedom. The eclipse isn't pressing in on you anymore, and so you can make your own choices, and you can also perhaps allow yourself to start to imagine and think about how things could be, because Virgo, there is a positivity to this weekend, and even a faith that really things can work out for you. So if you're starting to think about the future, and if you start to really believe that things really could be possible, then that is the beginning of something that could turn out to be really wonderful, because you have that belief to begin with. And for Virgos, that can sometimes be difficult. Virgos can actually be very, very critical. They can sort of pour cold water not just on other people's optimism, but also on their own optimism. But I think there is actually evidence that things can happen. So if you have something something that's going through your mind that seems to be fantastical, don't just let go of it. I think there is a place for faith, and this faith does not have to be discussed. In fact, it's best that it's not discussed. If you talk about your hopes and your ambitions to other people, then you might not get a positive response, and you might then have second thoughts. So it's best that you just allow things to develop quietly, and then at a later stage, you will have a chance to make the most of things. And I should say another thing about Mercury. So we had a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury on what was it, on Thursday. And so when with this conjunction between the Sun and Mercury, for you, Virgo, it just could have been all a bit too much. There was a lot to deal with, and you may have felt that you were just running out of energy. But now Mercury is moving away from the Sun. So now, the Mercury is at sort of 9 degrees 13 Virgo, the Sun is at 6 degrees 49. So Mercury is now 2.5 degrees ahead of the Sun. So the power of the Sun is starting to diminish. And, when I talk about the power of the Sun, I don't necessarily mean that in a positive way. We think the light, life-giving warmth of the Sun. But, in Vedic astrology, the Sun is actually seen as a malefic. The Sun may be the worst of the malefics in some respects. And I think even, in Western astrology, combustion, when a planet is conjunct the Sun, it can be very difficult. But the thing is, the Mercury is moving away from the Sun, and this means that you're having an increasing level of objectivity. And of course, this coincides with the fact that the full moon eclipse is really starting to diminish, well, is certainly diminishing once the moon moves into Aries. And so I think that you have more freedom, and you also have more objectivity, and going back to your faith and your belief that things might be possible. As Mercury moves away from the Sun, there's less pressure, and you can afford to be more positive and more optimistic. And don't forget that Mercury is in Virgo. Mercury is in its own sign. Mercury is strongly placed, and so now, Virgo, you're starting to sort of get the benefits of Mercury's strength. I think that this weekend should get better as it goes along. I mean, I think overall, Sunday is probably going to be a better day than Saturday. I mean, I know that late on Sunday, the moon in Aries is making a square to Mars, and is making a conjunction to Saturn. But I wouldn't worry about that too much. That just might be about you having sort of powerful and intense thoughts, and maybe not wanting to be disturbed. I mean, I think that the Mars square Saturn, it does have to be considered to some extent. But I mean, I don't want to talk too much about Mars square Saturn in today's in the video for the weekend. I'll probably be talking about it when I do the video for Monday. Libra, it's time to reflect on what is going on with Venus, your ruling planet. As you probably know, Venus is in Libra, and Venus in Libra, well, it's a strong position, isn't it? I mean, Venus rules Libra, but things are starting to change. Venus is slowing down. So normally Venus goes over a degree every day. Normally it goes faster than the Sun, at least from the Earth's perspective. But now it's going slower than the Sun. I think it's going right now at about 50 arc minutes. I think it's about 50 arc minutes a day. Now that is quite slow. Remember, there are 50 arc minutes in a degree. So we've got Venus slowing down. Now, so with Venus slowing down, you might be finding, Libra, that perhaps that your responses are just maybe a bit slower than usual. Maybe you're able to, on a positive note, be able to look at things for longer. So if things are slowing down, maybe you're able to slow everything going on that's around you, but perhaps impacting on you. So that might make things, a bit easier for you. Though, it would be good if, you could move quickly and, make the most of, everything that's around you. After all, Venus is in its own sign. But Venus is about to change. We've got on September the 10th, Venus moves into Scorpio. That is a huge change. So, in less than a fortnight, Venus moves into the sign of its detriment. And that suggests to me that, if possible, you should make the most right now of, everything that's available, and you shouldn't allow anything to hold you back. So Libra, have you got what it takes? And the question then is, well, what is holding you back? What could be, preventing you from seeing something through to completion? Well, the Sun and Venus, have been roughly moving at the same speed, and they've been moving in the same aspect to one another. The Sun and Venus have been in a 45-degree aspect with each other for a long time. And today, this 45-degree aspect between the Sun and Venus is exact. And, the 45-degree aspect, a semi-square, it is dynamic. It represents a challenge. It can represent a pressure. It can represent something that, needs to be confronted. And so, you look at the chart, you have got, you've got Venus in Libra, that's you, feeling good about yourself, hopefully. But then you clash with the Sun in Virgo. And the Sun in Virgo might represent something just, maybe telling you what to do. You thought you had it all sorted out, and then you realize that there are just other things that need to be done, and you don't want to do it. Sun in Virgo could also be about perfectionism, wanting to do things absolutely right. And it's a perfectionism that may not always be helpful. I mean, you cannot be 100% perfect, but with this Sun semi-square Venus, the concept of perfection might be more important than usual. And I'm not convinced that it's necessarily very healthy. So, think about what you're doing, what your plans are, and also what might be trying to frustrate your plans. Now, the frustrations might come from some external force, a person, for example, a person, telling you what to do, trying to tell you what to do, and perhaps wanting you to do things that you just absolutely do not want to do. And thinking about where your priorities should lie. Your priorities right now, Libra, should lie with yourself. You've got things to do. Ideally, you'll get these things done before Venus moves into Scorpio, and also, I said that Venus is slowing down. Venus will continue slowing down. It will get slower and slower and slower until on October the 3rd, it will come to a standstill. It will go retrograde. So now, while Venus is in its own sign, while it's moving forward, while it's got a certain amount of speed, you want to ideally, do as much as possible. Yeah, sure, be aware of what might be trying to hold you back, who might be trying to hold you back. And that's where the battle might come in. There could be a sense of a confrontation, or certainly a clash of wills. So really do think about that. And we do have the moon moving into Aries this weekend. And, with the moon moving into Aries, well, of course, the moon in Aries, well, the moon is moving into your opposite sign. And the moon eventually makes a square to Mars. It also makes a conjunction to Saturn. And so it's really bringing to life the Mars-Saturn square, which is going to be such an important feature of the very end of August and perhaps the first day or two of September. And with the moon in Aries, certain people perhaps can't be avoided, and you can really see, how they might be able to mess your life up. They could present you with obstacles. They could, at least on the surface, appear to be holding you back. I mean, it might be a question of just appearances. You don't have an entirely negative approach. I mean, we do have this Mars square Saturn coming up, and it may be that the Mars square Saturn has a constructive impact. For example, you might be involved with something that really is difficult. It could be a battle, and perhaps you can't do it on your own. You need someone else's help, and this help may not be necessarily what you expect. You might be told something you disagree with, but just because you disagree with something, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And perhaps also through another person's hard work, you can in some way benefit, particularly if you yourself are also able to push yourself hard. So, if everyone is gathering together, around the same goal, and they're prepared to push themselves to the limit, then it may be that quite a lot can be achieved. Scorpio. There is a build-up to a square between Mars and Saturn. And, this Mars square Saturn, it takes place, right at the end of a month. I mean, it is pretty much the end of a month. It's, on sort of August the 31st, September the 1st. So, sort of Monday, Tuesday, Mars is exactly square Saturn. And this aspect is going to impact you directly. I mean, Mars is your ruler. Saturn, can be quite a difficult energy. And so with Mars square Saturn, there just may be things that you have to work on. It's not what you want. It could be, just incredibly annoying. But Scorpio, that it is necessary. Yeah, it could be a struggle. It could indeed be something of a fight. But maybe this fight represents, a new beginning. Once it's all over, hopefully you will have got your victory. Then you can start addressing yourself to the future. And there's no reason then, Scorpio, why you can't be successful. You'll be helped, of course, by the fact that Jupiter continues to move through Leo, this very high-profile sign in your chart. So handle it right, and I do think that luck is very much on your side. So why am I saying all this? Because I'm talking about Monday and Tuesday and beyond. What about the weekend? Well, as far as the weekend is concerned, the weekend starts with the moon in Pisces. So moon in Pisces, in a way, that's a continuation, of the eclipse, because we had the eclipse in Pisces late on Thursday and into Friday. Moon in Pisces, opposition the sun in Virgo, and that could have said something about maybe the way you were trying to organize yourself, particularly on a social level. And there could have been questions about autonomy. How autonomous should you be? What power do you give to other people, and in particular, people like your friends and your associates, people you have to, for example, work with? How much control do you actually give them? Because fundamentally, you have to think about yourself and what is important to you. And then Moon goes into Aries. Now, why that matters is because Moon going into Aries really picks up on the Mars square Saturn. So when the Moon moves into Aries, right at the end of a weekend and into Monday, the Moon makes a conjunction to Saturn. In fact, first it makes a square to Mars, and then it makes a conjunction to Saturn. And that is quite a dramatic aspect. And it might well be that this Mars-Saturn square, which is theoretically exact on sort of Monday or Tuesday, really hits home late on Sunday and early on Monday. So that's something to look out for, and it might be that you recognize that in order to achieve your dreams, or at the very least to find whatever it is you're looking for, you actually have to really sort of push yourself. You have to make sure that everything is done properly, really done properly. And I don't want to encourage you to be obsessive. I mean, you can't be 100% perfect, but the more perfect you can be, the more you've covered all the details from all angles, the better it's going to be. And it is a positive process. It really is. I know that Mars square Saturn as an aspect has a very difficult reputation, but I think that you can actually use it to your own benefit, because it really is encouraging you to get it right. And if you can utilize that energy, well, what can stop you? You've got something that is close to perfection on your side, and at the same time, Scorpio, you have right now a fundamental positivity. You just know that if you do get it right, it can happen. You kind of know that good luck is on your side, and that really helps you deal with Mars square Saturn, because you look at Mars square Saturn on its own in isolation. You look it up in a book, particularly some of the older books, and Mars square Saturn would seem to be a really disastrous aspect, but I don't think it need be disastrous. I think for you, Scorpio, it can be very constructive, and as the weekend progresses, I think that you will be able to get to grips with the energies of this Mars square Saturn, be able to use them to get it right. And at the same time, you're going to be reassured and bolstered by your constant positivity. Sagittarius. The weekend starts with the moon in Pisces and it ends with the moon in Aries. So the Pisces part of the weekend, which is largely going to be Saturday, represents a time perhaps where you are just recovering from the full moon eclipse. Of course, the full moon eclipse was in Pisces. This was in very early Pisces. So the full moon eclipse having taken place at 4 degrees 54 Pisces. The moon still had nearly a sign to run through before it moved into Aries, and so while the moon is in late Pisces, through most of Saturday, perhaps even sort of all of Saturday and into Sunday, it just might be that actually not a huge amount is going on, at least externally. And instead, Sagittarius, there may be things to think about, because I do think that this lunar eclipse was important. As I said yesterday in my video for Friday, it's an eclipse that was in mutable signs. You, Sagittarius, are in mutable signs, and it really kind of hit everything. If you think about the mutable signs, you had Sun and Mercury in Virgo, you had the Moon in Pisces, you had Uranus in Gemini. In fact, you kind of had a grand cross if you include Sagittarius in that grand cross. So it really affecting your sign. So yeah, it could have been quite exhausting, and perhaps you needed just time to just get over it and to think about what that eclipse means. And when we're talking about a full moon eclipse, that is about thinking about the truth, what you learned. Hopefully there were some realizations. I say hopefully because it's always good to have realizations, to see things for what they are, and you can see things for what they are in many different ways. It could be about the way someone responds to you. It's what they say to you. It might be that you recognize that you have been moving in a particular direction, and you start to question that direction. Did you get it right? If you didn't get it right, it's not like you have to completely throw everything out. Instead, there might be some fine tuning to do. I do actually think that the full moon eclipse was something positive, and it's not just something that lasts for one day. A full moon eclipse lasts at least a fortnight, maybe a month, maybe even longer than a month. And you get insights into what it is that you want, what it is that you should be directing yourself towards, and because it's because it's an eclipse in Pisces, that Pisces gives you a degree of grounding, thinking about where you are, where you live. Are you happy where you live? How are you getting on with your family? And these kind of questions. And this might be something you're thinking about on Saturday, or it just does seem that it never actually goes anywhere. You just have these thoughts and perhaps even conversations, but there's not necessarily any immediate conclusion to it. And then the moon moves into Aries. And the moon moving into Aries is quite possibly a good thing. It is a new beginning, maybe even a new dawn. It's kind of strange to talk about a new dawn just after a full moon. It's not a completely new dawn, because there have been things going on since the new moon, which was 2 weeks ago, which are still important. You're halfway through a lunar cycle, so maybe it's incorrect to talk about a new dawn when you are only halfway through this lunar cycle, but it just does feel that things have changed. And also the moon in Aries, it's the first sign of the zodiac, and it's moving into a fire sign, which for you, Sagittarius, I think is very welcome. Getting some of that far back. We had all those planets in Leo. We had Mercury in Leo. We had the Sun in Leo. We had Jupiter in Leo. There may have been a couple of days, when the moon was in Leo as well. So there was all that Leo emphasis, and most of that has gone. Now we're just down to Jupiter, and so with the moon moving into Aries, it just might feel that some of that fire, is returning. And I think that as far as you're concerned, that is very welcome. And perhaps with the moon moving through Aries, this is the first time that you can start to put into action some of the revelations that were available to you at the time of the eclipse. So yeah, you have the revelations, you're thinking about what might be possible, and then as the moon moves into Aries, this very dynamic sign, then Sagittarius, you can really start to make progress. You can really start to start moving, and it's not like you're going to be totally crazy, totally irresponsible as you move forward. I think actually the Sagittarius, you have a very real responsibility to you. I think that you're able to communicate with authority, and I think Sagittarius, you kind of have an idea that you should be in some form of leadership. You kind of like the idea of being the one who initiates, the one who proposes, and at the same time, you can do it in such a way that is very responsible, and you're prepared to take on board, a certain amount of organization. So it's not like you're going to just suggest that something is done and then you expect other people to do it. You'll be able to facilitate it. So if something needs to be facilitated and organized in the late weekend through Sunday and into Monday, I think that's something that you're going to be able to do very well. Capricorn. The weekend is perhaps a bit slow to start with. The moon is moving through late Pisces. It's kind of made its aspects. I mean, it's made its big aspects. It's made its opposition to the sun, its conjunction, its opposition to Mercury, square to Uranus, and so it's now just a question of allowing the thing to just wind down, at least in terms of the short-term impact of an eclipse. So, when we're talking about an eclipse, because we had the eclipse, on late Thursday and into Friday, and there is a question about time. So you have the immediate impact of the eclipse, right as it's happening. Then you have the longer-term aspect of the eclipse, or perhaps the medium term, the eclipse and running through until the next new moon. Then it could go further. It could actually say something about the whole month, until the full moon after that. But I think the next 2 weeks is when you really do feel the eclipse, and it is about change for everyone. I mean, as far as you're concerned, the eclipse probably doesn't affect you, is unlikely to impact you as much as it does other people. I mean, it's perhaps more of a gentle influence. You thinking about maybe trying to sort of bring things down to earth. It's all very well having ideas. We're going to have some fantastic ideas, but those ideas in themselves might not be of much value unless you're prepared to really work with them and develop them. And so that's certainly something you can do, but you don't have to. And it might well be, Capricorn, that the eclipse appears to completely pass you by. So, of all the 12 signs, I think that you might be the sign that one of the signs that is least impacted. And then the moon does move into Aries, and so when the moon moves into Aries, that represents something new. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's a very dynamic sign, and so it might seem that after a period of chaos, there has been a new start. And your first impressions of the moon moving into Aries, might actually be quite optimistic. You're feeling that finally something has changed, something, there is action, but you want that action, to take place, on your terms. I don't think you're going to be in the mood to just jump if someone else makes a suggestion. You want to be able to make the decisions. Now, the moon, while it moves through Aries, does move towards a conjunction of Saturn. It also moves towards a square of Mars. Now, those two aspects, they do happen right at the end of a weekend and into Monday. And I think this is kind of suggesting that the Mars square Saturn aspect, which is exact the beginning of next week, well, it almost is the beginning of next week, sort of Monday, Tuesday, that aspect, which is exact, is brought into focus by the moon. Because the moon is applying to a conjunction of Saturn on Sunday, and it's applying to a square of Mars. And this Mars square Saturn is not necessarily an easy aspect. I mean, it's perhaps about you, holding firm, holding the fort, holding to perhaps what you believe in, and then Mars squares Saturn. I mean, Mars can be something annoying, could be somebody annoying, someone that is trying to attract your attention, someone that is almost deliberately trying to disturb you. And the question then is, Capricorn, how do you respond? Do you treat it as a battle, as a confrontation? Or is there something else going on? Perhaps you have become a little too set in your ways, and Mars is challenging you to do things differently. Perhaps it's challenging you to assert yourself, to make yourself available, to perhaps become more public, more open in terms of what you do. And that might be a reasonable challenge, but it depends on the situation. And so this Mars square Saturn is, it's not an easy aspect. Okay, if you want to look at Mars square Saturn in its worst light, you could say, well, Mars could represent, an accident. It could represent a confrontation, an argument. It could represent a dispute, which is not in anyone else, which is in no one's interest, not in your interest, not in the other person's interest. So, start to think about that as you move into next week. And I think that this weekend perhaps it is the foundations of this struggle. Yeah, that things have changed. There's a new beginning, but also with a new beginning might become a new dispute, something new which could aggravate you. And I think it's important that you evaluate this potentially aggravating situation in the right way. Aquarius. The weekend starts with the moon in Pisces, and it ends with the moon in Aries. So moon in Pisces, well, moon doesn't actually do very much in Pisces. I mean, it's made its big aspects, that happened in early Pisces. So the moon is really, it's void of course. And so when you've got a void moon, it just might feel that, like on Saturday, just nothing much is going on. And perhaps if there is any work to do, any action, it might all be taking place, on an internal level. You perhaps, trying to work things out. Perhaps there are decisions to be made. Perhaps, with the full moon eclipse, there were realizations. You perhaps understood something about your situation, perhaps your finances as well. That might be part of it. It's not just about money, but it could be. And so you have this understanding, or this developing understanding, and, you can work with it. And I don't think that anything in particular needs to be discussed. It's perhaps more of an internal process. And then the moon moves into Aries, and I think that when the moon does move into Aries, you perhaps become sort of more open. I think you find that you've just got more things to say, though you had to be careful what you say. I mean, the moon makes a sextile to Pluto, then it makes a conjunction to Neptune. I mean, I think the moon sextile Pluto is fine. I think the moon sextile Pluto is about you being able to communicate in a way that is, very direct and dynamic, and which is also powerful. But with a moon conjunct Neptune, it just might be that you become a little bit tongue-tied. You think you've got something to say, but when you say the words, they don't come out right. Think perhaps before you open your mouth. You don't necessarily have to always be talking, and there may be a place for silence with moon conjunct Neptune, because that way you avoid making a fool of yourself. You avoid giving the impression of being confused. And then the moon moves on, and the moon makes a square to Mars, and it makes a conjunction to Saturn. So in other words, the moon is moving towards a conjunction with your ruler, because Saturn rules Aquarius. And with this aspect, you feel that there's perhaps something that needs to be communicated. Saturn is a very responsible planet. You need to let everyone know. But, you might be concerned about, what happens if you're honest. Honesty is supposed to be a virtue, but not everyone appreciates honesty. You tell someone the truth of the matter, and, they react badly. And, being an Aquarius, you try your hardest to be objective, not to get too emotional about things. But still, it's probably a good idea, Aquarius, to just be aware of the emotional dimension, because, emotions can crop up, when you least expect it. Another thing to point out is that over the weekend, we do have a semi-square between the Sun and Venus. And this semi-square may have an impact on relationships. I mean, the Sun, after all, is ruler of Leo, your opposite sign. And if it's semi-square Venus, it might just be, Aquarius, that when trying to deal with other people, there's just a certain amount of uneasiness. You should be able to get on with them, but it's just not entirely easy. And maybe there's an issue with priorities. What's your priority? What's their priority? You, for example, might feel that you want to do things differently, that you need a break, you need some fresh air, and the other person might be just kind of wrapped up in their own world, and they might not appreciate your enthusiasm, and so they just could be a bit of a mismatch. And this Sun semi-square Venus, certainly perhaps if you've been in a relationship for a prolonged period of time, it's just possible that over the next month, or over the last month, there just could have been a certain divergence there, different people with different priorities. But I don't think we need to exaggerate this semi-square between Sun and Venus. Just respect other people, respect that they have their own way of working, and if it doesn't accord with your way of working, it's not the end of the world. Pisces. The moon is going to be in Pisces at the beginning of a weekend, and this is just a reflection of the fact that we've just had this full moon eclipse. And so you got the moon in Pisces, opposition the sun in Virgo, and it just might feel that you're getting over something. The eclipse is done, at least in its most dynamic phase. And so, you're trying to work out perhaps what the eclipse is. And so, with the moon in Pisces, you are thinking about yourself, not just thinking about yourself. You're very sensitive to yourself and your needs, and you pick up at the same time. You pick up on other people's feelings quite quickly. And as the moon moves away from the opposition of the sun, certain things, start to make more sense. So, when that eclipse was exact, it might have been difficult to think straight. And perhaps you were just dealing with something or somebody that, you couldn't make sense of, and maybe they seemed to be, more powerful than you were. But as the moon moves away from the opposition to the sun, you just feel that you've got more freedom, and you've got a greater capacity to think and to try to understand. And so over the course of Saturday, it might be a time of awareness, starting to really understand another person or another situation in a new way. And it might actually be quite refreshing. And you might be in a good position to start to make a decision. What do you do? What action do you take regarding another person? And then the moon moves into Aries, and with the moon moving into Aries, you kind of, in some respects, feel even better, because the moon is no longer in the opposite sign to the sun, and it's no longer in Pisces. It's no longer in your sign. And so as the moon moves through Aries, you start to think about what exactly your priorities are. And you might be thinking about your own life, what you have, what you don't have, what you need. And that is a good way of judging other people, or perhaps judging whether other people are useful. And, additionally, Pisces, you're going to be, I think, pretty good at explaining yourself, and also quite good at just explaining things in a very sort of no-nonsense kind of way. You know that you have a particular position, perhaps in the hierarchy. You know that you have a certain capacity for leadership. You know that you can be authoritative when you want to be. And, by the end of a weekend, you're really starting to feel all of this. You're starting to, feel your own power, and you just know that you can be respected. And, this really is facilitated by just the fact that you're just not so close to certain other people. You have your distance, you have your detachment, you are able to think for yourself. And I think that you can certainly command respect. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 34, which is the power of the great. So it's talking about your power, what you can do. And I think, we have had this hexagram, I think pretty recently. And so, it is a time when you really want to make things happen. You want to apply yourself. You want to get noticed. And one question you might have is, do you have what it takes? I think you certainly have the will. You have the ambition, and fundamentally in yourself, you probably have the power as well. But with the power of a great, you still have to interact with the outside world, and the outside world, can be slow, having to deal with people who may be a law unto themselves, dealing with situations that, they should be straightforward, but they're not always straightforward. And so it's not an entirely easy hexagram, the power of the great. But you're at least aware of your own power. Now, the fifth line moves. And the fifth line talks about a goat. And it's saying you can let go of the goat. So what that means is, the goat represents perhaps a certain type of personality, perhaps an approach you have been taking. And the goat is seen as an animal that is very stubborn, that just keeps going, that is very resistant to outside advice. It just and that is one way of being. But the I Ching is advising you to lose that goat, to just not be quite so stubborn. And the Greg Winkup, in his translation of the I Ching, he talks about a ram. He says, you let go of a ram, let the ram free. I mean, you have this obstinate animal, this ram, you let it go, you feel better. And of course the ram feels better as well, because the ram is free. So that's a hint with the Winkup translation that maybe there's some kind of relationship or some kind of link between you and another person, and it's going badly, and the other person knows it's going badly, and if you let go of it all, then just it's good for everyone. So that is an interpretation that Winkup gives. So so that is a possible manifestation. But I think the broader interpretation is that we can just lose some of our stubbornness and just be more easy, be more relaxed, and as a result, we're just going to feel better about ourselves, and things all of a sudden just become really easy, become really straightforward. We just have to let go of some of these ridiculous principles that we've been holding on to. We want to be right. We all want to be right, but being right isn't what it's all about. It's perhaps about being flexible and being reasonable. And once we do that, once we let go of certain things, then things just are a lot more straightforward. So, fifth line moves. Now, because the fifth line moves, we move to a different hexagram, and this hexagram is hexagram number 43, which is breakthrough. Now, it sounds good, breakthrough. I mean, this is how the Wilhelm translation translates it, but it's not necessarily a good thing, because it indicates that there's a problem, that something is not necessarily right. And it does talk about conflict, and there is this idea that perhaps the enemy is winning, or there's something about to go wrong, and it's not a disaster because we have an opportunity to escape. So breakthrough is about realizing there's a problem, and taking action. And that means, running for the hills, or no, you don't necessarily have to run to the hills, but instead just backing out of a dangerous situation, when sort of defeat is becoming increasingly likely. I don't know what that is. Remember, this is just a reading for the weekend. I don't think we're talking about a huge defeat here, but it's more a situation that could turn out to be dangerous. Something you get involved with, with the power of the great, and you have a great sense of your own power. But there is this warning in the I Ching. Do you have enough power? Does the situation allow you to use your power? Maybe just the world is just too material. This world of just objects just may not be the right place to fully assert ourselves. And as soon as we do start to assert ourselves, as soon as we start to become more relaxed, as soon as we sort of lose the goat, then something else comes in, and we start to realize that there is a dangerous situation, and it's not going to completely eat us up, because the I Ching just is saying that if we act in a timely fashion, we should be able to escape the problem. So I think it's very important to be aware of what's happening today, and in particular to be aware of what could go wrong. And that's it. That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very, very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I will talk to you again very soon.